I want to talk about the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, because everyone who talks about the stuff we talk about is talking about Mike Johnson this week. And I'm going to go into this assuming that the people watching this may just know something about how this guy got elected Speaker of the House, but I'm assuming you don't know anything about him. So that's where I'm coming from on this. The thing that all of you, I think, need to know about Mike Johnson, the Republican that got elected Speaker of the House this week, unanimously among Republicans, is that he may be the biggest Christian nationalist politician to get to this level of politics that we've ever seen. For those of you who are as old as I am, you remember when John McCain chose Sarah Palin to be his running mate in 2008. And one of the many reasons that she was such a disaster for him is because she was so heavily into Jesus and like weirdly so. And seemed like she was a creationist and she wanted to put her religious beliefs into law. And she was going to be a heartbeat away from the presidency. And John McCain wasn't exactly a big health nut and he was getting older. That was a concern in 2008. And now you have this guy, Mike Johnson, who is now two people away from the presidency. And that's also scary. So the question I want to try to answer here is there are two questions. What exactly does he believe? And how the hell did he get this high up in politics while the mainstream media has mostly downplayed or ignored all of his crazy Christian beliefs? That's what I'm hoping we can answer. I don't know, for those of you who follow the judicial side of things, maybe you're familiar with the name Leonard Leo. And if you're not, he likes it that way. Leonard Leo is kind of the Svengali of right-wing judicial nominees. He's the guy who's basically handpicked the last three Supreme Court justices that Trump appointed. He got so many of his Federalist Society picks to be appointed, nominated, and then approved by GOP senators to have lifetime appointments on the bench. Leonard Leo is the reason our whole judicial system has taken this scary rightward shift. He's the guy behind it. And most people who don't pay attention to law have no idea who he is. That's what I think Mike Johnson is too. Like a behind the scenes guy who wants to shift everything to the right. And now, finally, he's in a position where he can help make that happen. And I'm also worried because now that he's in that position, it's far too late to stop a guy like this. So, and the thing is, there's no shortage of right-wing extremists in the Republican Party. Those of us who follow politics know who a lot of them are because they always seek out the spotlight. They never shy away from talking about their Christian beliefs. They're also sloppy in their rhetoric because their speeches resemble church revival services. They use every media appearance to tell you about Jesus. And it's creepy if you're not Christian and probably even if you are. But one of the interesting things is after Mike Johnson got chosen to be speaker, there were so many articles with the headlines like, who is Mike Johnson? Let's find out. Here's 55 things you might want to know about the guy because you probably know zero. Even Senator Susan Collins of Maine was like, I'm going to have to Google who this guy is. So he's not familiar unless you're just addicted to like Fox News. But this guy has promoted just the most extremist right-wing positions for decades without really getting attacked for it in the national press because he mostly functioned behind the scenes. His name would appear in articles, maybe, but always like in the fourth paragraph. He was never the main character in any of these things. So I'm going to start running through a list of a lot of his more insane positions. And I have a bunch of tabs I'm going to show you along the way here. So let's start with this. Here's one. This is him from 2022. I'm going to hone in on this part here. And this is the part I want to show you. Most people today, this is from 2022, Mike Johnson on Facebook. Most people today who insist upon a rigid separation between church and state are unaware that the phrase derives not from the Constitution, but from a personal letter that President Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptist Association in 1802. Right there, I mean, he is correct. It doesn't appear in the Constitution. No one was saying it did, but okay, let's keep going here. Thomas Jefferson explained that because religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, the language of the First Amendment is a vital safeguard for our rights of conscience. I'm going to just skip down here for a second. Jefferson clearly did not mean that metaphorical wall of separation between church and state was to keep religion from influencing issues of civil government. To the contrary, it was meant to keep the federal government from impeding the religious practices of citizens. The founders wanted to protect the church from an encroaching state, not the other way around. In other words, the church is not allowed to the state is not allowed to tell churches how to function, but he's saying churches can absolutely tell the government how to run, which is wildly off the mark. It's not what Jefferson meant, and we know that based on his other writing. It's also not how courts have interpreted the law over the years, over decades and decades of case law. They have very clearly said, the government has no business establishing religion, promoting one religious view over another, or, and this is important, religion over non-religion. The government's supposed to stay out of the religion game, and churches shouldn't have any special privileges when it comes to telling the government how to function. So that one's disturbing. I'm going to get back here for a second. Let me jump to a different thing he pointed out. He has a podcast with his wife. And one of the many things he said on this podcast with his wife, this is from Politico, on occasion, Kelly Johnson will tee up her husband for an answer. Why are we the freest, most powerful, most successful, most benevolent nation in the history of the world? And why does every other nation on the planet look to us for leadership and even expect it to us? She asked in one episode. And if you've ever seen, what was that HBO show, Newsroom? You're waiting for the guy to respond to say, I promise you, a lot of nations do not think we're the most powerful, most benevolent, most successful nation ever. I promise you, no other nation's motto is we're number 2. Okay? They do not think we are amazing. We are awful at healthcare. We're awful at religious freedom, for real. So they're not looking to us like that. But her husband responds, explaining that America is the only country in the world founded upon a creed or a religious statement of faith. What? We're not. There's no statement of faith. We're not founded on in God we trust. That was the 1950s. We started jamming that in places. So what is he talking about? I don't know. But we're not founded on a statement of faith. So he's absolutely wrong on that. Here's one you may have seen in the news. Mike Johnson famously represented Answers in Genesis, the creationists, Ken Ham, Ark Encounter, because one of the things that happened a few years ago when Ark Encounter first opened is that they really wanted tax breaks from the state. And they said, our religious ministry here that's opening a giant Noah's Ark replica, we're a tourist attraction. So we should be eligible for tax breaks as a tourist destination, because Kentucky has a whole thing in place where if you're bringing people to the state of Kentucky, they want to give you a fraction of your ticket sales back to you as an incentive for bringing people to Kentucky. And that's a fine program. The reason Kentucky did not want to give that incentive to Ark Encounter is, one, it's a religious ministry, and that's a game they don't want to play. And two, Ark Encounter and Answers in Genesis, which oversees it, they discriminate in hiring. They have a no Jews allowed policy when it comes to who they hire to work at Ark Encounter. And they have a no atheist policy and a no progressive Christian policy. Well, Mike Johnson worked with Ken Ham to try to change that. Here's an article about that. And this is the part you want to see. Answers in Genesis, let me get the date on this. This is from 2015, updated a couple years later. Answers in Genesis is being represented by attorneys from Freedom Guard and the Center for Religious Expression. Appearing with him in the video, Freedom Guard attorney Mike Johnson, now the Speaker of the House, described his nonprofit organization as a public interest law firm dedicated to the defense of religious liberty in America. Johnson said the Ark Encounter project was blocked from Kentucky's incentive program despite meeting the necessary criteria. The necessary criteria being they're a tourist attraction, basically. And the sad thing is, even though this went back and forth in the courts for a little while, ultimately, Ark Encounter won. Ark Encounter was able to get tax breaks, and you could see from the end of this, not this article, let me jump to a different one here. There we go. This is from Guardian, but it's the same coverage here. The case was won, and the Ark Encounter, featuring a vast ark-like structure meant to depict that in the biblical flood narrative, as described in the book of Genesis, it went ahead. This is the important part. By 2017, it had received $18 million in tax incentives, according to the Huffington Post. And they've gotten that money for several years after that as well. And so, just to give you an idea, like Mike Johnson helped Ark Encounter win back millions and millions of dollars, even though they discriminate against Jews and atheists and Hindus and Muslims and all of that. And Mike Johnson's the reason Ark Encounter is so filthy rich. Here's another thing to show you. I'm just running through a list of tabs here, all right? This is another one. This is from Warren Throckmorton, who's been covering a guy named David Barton, who is a famous pseudo-historian, doesn't have a real degree, but basically David Barton's whole shtick is he goes around the country to every gullible conservative Christian he can find, and he says, I'm an expert in the Founding Fathers, and the Founding Fathers loved Jesus, and they wanted this country to be built on Jesus's name, and all of it's a lie, and actual historians know it's a lie, but very gullible Christians believe every word of it. And by gullible Christians, that includes politicians like Mike Johnson. And check this out. This is from Warren Throckmorton again. Representative Johnson has been a longtime fan of David Barton. In 2021, Johnson praised David Barton in a talk to a group of state legislators. I just want to say at the outset, I'm grateful to Wall Builders, which is Barton's organization, and David and Rick and everybody involved. And I was introduced to David Barton and his ministry a quarter century ago, and it has had such a profound influence on me and my work and my life and everything I do. So I'm just so grateful you guys continue to sow into this work and help equip the soldiers on the front lines. And so thanks to all of you for being willing to serve in this critical time for the country. I mean, just think about what that means for a second. That means Mike Johnson probably believes, like true, sincere believer, that our country was founded as a Christian nation, that all those founding fathers wanted to create like a safe space for Jesus. Like that's what he thinks because what David Barton lies about, that's what he believes. By the way, David Barton is such a liar that like a decade ago when he wrote a book about Thomas Jefferson called The Jefferson Lies, I believe, his Christian book publishers were like, dude, you're lying so much in this book. We need to take it off the bookshelves and stop distributing it. And you would think that sort of thing, when even Christian publishers are like, too many lies in this book. The same people who published the Bible are like, David Barton, you are lying too much. When that book is taken off the shelves, you would think Christians would be like, okay, David Barton is not trustworthy. But no, he's been pulling the stunts, all of this ever since. And Mike Johnson loves David Barton. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. Here's another thing Johnson did. When Democrats took over the House a couple of years ago, like 2018-ish, one of the things that happened is that when Democrats were in charge of subcommittee hearings, which happen all the time in Congress, if someone who was a witness had to take an oath and they didn't say, so help me God at the end of their oath, the Democrats in charge are like, yeah, we don't care. That's fine, dog. Like, just say the main part of the oath. don't care about the religious thing. Let's move on to the work at hand. Mike Johnson, who was in Congress at the time then, was so mad about that, he actually filed legislation later on. Check this out. He filed legislation amending the rules of the House of Representatives to require a specific oath be administered to any witnesses appearing before a committee. And you could see from the text here, this is the part that matters. This is the oath. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. This is a thing he's wasting his time on. Like, anyone could have just said it if they wanted to. But no, he wanted to make sure people who didn't feel comfortable saying that would be forced to say it because, his God needs the praise or something like that. So that's disturbing. Here's another thing he did. He promoted a conservative Christian sponsored Bible course in public schools. And there's been this push over, it goes in and out over the years, but basically there's been a push to get public schools to offer an elective to students where they can learn about the Bible as literature. And if it's taught correctly, that might actually be valuable. But the specific curriculum that Mike Johnson was promoting in Louisiana was widely criticized for having evangelical zeal and treating the Bible as, quote, an accurate record of history. Like, you can't do that. That's too subjective. You need to make it objective. And in response to the critics who said you're only promoting one version of the Bible, this is what Mike Johnson said in response to all that criticism. He says, yes, the Supreme Court allows for the Bible to be taught in public schools, but only objectively as part of a secular program of education. Johnson defended the Bible course on behalf of the Louisiana Family Forum, which is a right-wing Christian group. He argued that the Supreme Court did not say you have to discuss everybody's view on the Bible. That would be politically correct to treat all religious traditions equally, which is another way of just saying, you guys, my version of the Bible, my interpretation of Christianity, the Christianity that my church teaches, that's the only right way to teach students. And we're going to just call that the Bible. Like, there's only one version and it's mine, and that's the only one that counts. Even, again, no one hates progressive Christians more than conservative Christians. You know what I mean? But again, this is Mike Johnson. Couple other things. This is an interesting one. I did not see this covered in a lot of articles about him this week. Mike Johnson supported, there was a Louisiana school district that decided, remember when Colin Kaepernick was kneeling during the national anthem back in the days when he was allowed to play football? A Louisiana school district instituted a policy saying student athletes were required to stand during the national anthem, which seems kind of unfair to those kids. Like, why would they have to do it? That makes no sense. But Mike Johnson was the guy who supported that move. And this is what he said. Let me pull this up for you right here. There we go. Here's what he said at the time to critics who said, you can't force students to say this stuff. He said, the board is doing the right thing. They're going to make a statement that they certainly respect the dignity of all students and their religious freedoms, but at the same time, we don't have to sacrifice who we are as Americans. The Bossier School Board is not going to bend over and bow to the whims of these atheist, radical, secular groups. And that's who's picking on the Bossier School Board again. These groups are on a search and destroy mission for all things religious, and now by extension, all things patriotic. Which is weird because it's not just atheist groups saying you can't force kids to pledge allegiance, to say the anthem. They have a right to not do that. And what is he doing? He's basically saying if you don't stand for the pledge or say the national anthem, you're unpatriotic. Notice that he's basically equating atheists with non-patriots, as if atheists are incapable of loving the country. And that's messed up for all sorts of reasons too. And also, again, if you value freedom, if you value the First Amendment at all, then forcing kids to stand up and say the national anthem, or stand up even if they don't say it, just, I don't understand how that's patriotic. Like, you would think true love of the country, one, you shouldn't have to sing the national anthem or say it or pretend to say it in order to prove that you're a good American. That's just stupid. I have much more respect for people who say, like Kaepernick, who says, I don't want to stand for the national anthem or sing it because our country needs to do better. I'm actually going to kneel in protest to highlight, using the one platform that I have, that we need to be doing better. I want our country to improve. That makes a lot more sense to me than the people who just blindly go along with the anthem or the pledge out of a sense of, well, I just have to do this, but I don't actually care what's being said. Why is that any better? I don't get that at all. But that's what Mike Johnson likes. Here's an interesting one, too. Some of you may remember this from like a decade ago. In Texas, there was a school district where the cheerleaders on the field used to hold banners up. I'm going to show you a picture of one of these here. They used to hold up these banners at football games, and it had Bible verses on them. But the reason the cheerleaders were holding the banners at this public high school is so the football players could burst through the banner as they ran onto the field before a game. And the reason this became an issue is because there's an open question as to whether that banner right there, is that the students' free expression of their religious beliefs, or is that a school-sponsored banner right there? And again, atheist groups were arguing, you're on the football field. The cheerleaders are wearing school uniforms. This is a school-sanctioned football game. Of course, that's representing the school district. That's an endorsement of religion. Mike Johnson, on the other hand, I want you to check out what he said about all this. Here we go. This is, at the time, Mike Johnson was representing Liberty Counsel, the right-wing Christian group. And here's what he said. We're writing to affirm that public school administrators are acting appropriately and lawfully when they allow student-led, student-initiated forms of speech, even if that speech happens to be religious in nature. No student should ever have to leave his or her religious beliefs or expression at the schoolhouse gate. Thanks to the precedent set with our victory in Kuntz, superintendents should feel empowered to resist the bullying tactics of atheist groups, because federal and state law prohibiting government censorship of students' free speech is well established, which is just messed up because, again, if we were talking about any religion other than Christianity, the school district never would have been okay with it. You cannot put up, there is no God, have fun running through the banner, football players. They would never have let that happen. But again, it's always religious freedom when Christians do it, and it's always persecution when the districts or the church-state separation groups say, hey, remain neutral. But again, that is Mike Johnson. I'm running through. I swear, there's no shortage of these because this is what he's been doing his entire life. Check out this picture right here. This is, whoops, let me go back here for a second. Where did it go? There we go. This picture. This was sitting in a courtroom. I'm going to go back to a full screen here for a second. That image was seen in a courtroom in, I believe, Mississippi. And there was an argument as to, hey, that's a picture of Jesus. That shouldn't be in a government building. Well, Mike Johnson argued that that portrait of Jesus, sorry, that was in Louisiana. He said it was okay because the ideas expressed in this painting are not specific to any one faith. And they certainly don't establish a single state religion. Which is weird because that was Jesus. I'm not sure how many different religions you think he represents there. Okay, here's another thing he has done. Okay, You guys all know about the Johnson Amendment. It's the IRS rule that basically says nonprofits, which get a tax exemption, they're not allowed to use their nonprofit groups. If you're a church that's a nonprofit, you're not allowed to use your pulpit to tell people how to vote. The ACLU cannot send out a mailer saying, everyone go vote for Joe Biden. They can't, and they don't. But churches, a lot of conservative Christian churches, have been making the argument for years now that they should be allowed to tell their congregations how to vote and they should face no punishment for it. And the truth is, in reality, there have been a lot of pastors who have done that, like basically poking the bear, poking the IRS, saying, come after me, I dare you. And as far as we know, the IRS hasn't done anything to punish any of these people. But the rule is still technically in effect, the Johnson Amendment. Well, Mike Johnson has been pushing to get rid of it. And this is something that he said a couple of years ago. Representative Mike Johnson and another guy told the Values Voter crowd they supported weakening or repealing the Johnson Amendment. We need to unshackle the voice of the church again, said Johnson, who claimed the law silences and censors houses of worship. I'm going to pause there for a second. We need to unshackle the voice of the church again. First of all, don't use the language of slavery. You're not helping your case. Second, when have churches ever been silent? Never. They're never silent. I hear about pastors complaining and talking all the damn time. If only they were silent. They never are. The voice of the church is not in question ever. Anyway, Johnson said changing the law could be a game changer. And this other guy, the other guy said the voices on the left were never shackled. Now it's time to unshackle the voices on the right. Again, total BS. People on the right are never, ever suppressed or silenced. They have their own channels. They have their own fake Twitters. They have entire media houses to promote their BS. But again, it is more marketable to say you have been silenced and censored and canceled. That's where your comedy Netflix special comes from. So they got to pretend they're being suppressed. But that's another thing Mike Johnson has done. By the way, Mike Johnson has sponsored a bill in Congress to repeal the Johnson Amendment too. And then let me talk about a couple things you may have heard of at this point. Johnson is notoriously anti-gay. And to that end, let me show you this from the Christian Post. This is a guy, when he was a state representative in Louisiana, he defended the right of the Louisiana people to amend their constitution with the definition of marriage as the union of one man and one woman. The amendment also prohibited the recognition of same-sex unions from other states. So that's what he was trying to do as a state lawmaker, like put into place the only marriages that count is one man, one woman. I'm sure there was a parenthetical that said they shouldn't be related. Maybe we'll see. He also tried passing this bill over here that, as a state lawmaker, that permits faith-based anti-gay discrimination. Check out this little bit right here. Check this out. Oh, you know what? I'm going to skip this because I don't have this in front of me. I want to show you this. Here we go. This is an op-ed he wrote for a Louisiana newspaper in defense of the straight marriage only amendment. And I'm going to scroll down to what's right to your right side of his picture here. Same-sex marriage selfishly and deliberately deprives children of either a mother or a father. Children need both. Homosexual relationships are inherently unnatural, and the studies clearly show are ultimately harmful and costly for everyone. The studies do not show that, by the way. Society cannot give its stamp of approval to such a dangerous lifestyle. If we change marriage for this tiny, modern minority, we will have to do it for every deviant group. This, kids, is what's called the slippery slope argument. Polygamists, polyamorists, pedophiles, and others will be next in line to claim equal protection. There will be no legal basis to deny a bisexual the right to marry a partner of each sex, or a person to marry his pet. Like, you're going back to anti-gay bigotry circa 2003 or whatever it was to listen to that sort of stuff. But this is the stuff he was peddling for such a long time. And by the way, some of you may know, like 20 years ago, the Supreme Court overturned sodomy laws in Texas. This is what Mike Johnson, where did it go? Here we go. This is what he wrote in an article. At that time, justices take swipe at American values. He was so mad at the Supreme Court for overturning, or in their Lawrence v. Texas ruling. Look at this paragraph right here. Prescriptions against sodomy have deep roots in religion, politics, and law. States have always maintained the right to discourage the evils of sexual conduct outside marriage, and the state is right to discriminate between heterosexual and homosexual conduct, since the latter cannot occur within the confines of marriage. I mean, it totally can, but that's besides the point. What is he saying here? He's saying anyone who has gay sex should be imprisoned. It should be illegal. This guy is now two people away from the presidency. So that's disturbing. I don't need to go through what he thinks about trans kids. It's not great. I'm going to whip through some of these. He opposes abortion. No exceptions, right? He wants to block access to birth control as well. He represented a college once that did not want to follow Obama-era guidelines requiring employers to provide contraception to employees. He also represented the state of Louisiana when it was trying to punish doctors who provided abortions unless they jumped through a few made-up hoops first. He has, as a member of Congress, co-sponsored several bills to ban abortion nationwide. And I want to show you this clip. And I swear, I think I'm done with all the roundup in a second here. Let me show you this clip of what he said when it comes to why mass shootings occur. And obviously, there was one in Maine this week, so this may be a clip you have seen. But listen to what he blames for why school shootings are happening.
Now, some of y'all were around in the late 60s. You remember that, what that was about. The countercultural revolution, Woodstock and drugs and peace and free love and all that, but more about the undermining of the foundations of religion and morality. Because if you remember, in the late 60s, we invented things like no-fault divorce laws. We invented the sexual revolution. We invented radical feminism. We invented legalized abortion in 1973, where the state, the government, sanctions the killing of the unborn. All these things happened because, as collectively as Americans, we began to get together in growing numbers and thumb our nose at the Creator and say, we don't believe that anymore. We're rejecting the founders' natural law philosophy in favor of moral relativism, and we are going down another path. Now, what we tolerate in moderation, our children excuse in excess. What happens when you fast forward another 30 or 40 years? Well, here's a picture's worth 1,000 words. Go to the next one for me. I mean, we know that we're living in a completely amoral society. And so people say, how can a young person go into their schoolhouse and open fire on their classmates? Because we've taught a whole generation, a couple of generations now of Americans, that there is no right and wrong, that it's about survival of the fittest, and you evolve from the primordial slime. Why is that life of any sacred value? Because there's nobody sacred to whom it's owed. None of this should surprise us. And it leads in the next slide for me, it leads into just chaos.
So if you heard there, he blamed mass shootings on everything from no-fault divorce laws, radical feminism, to Roe v. Wade, to evolution. We teach kids evolution, and that's why they do it. You know what? Other countries teach evolution and have feminists and have abortion rights and allow for divorces, and they don't have gun problems like we do because they are smart about guns, and we in America are idiots about it. But that's another thing this guy has done. I guess, and by the way, when he was asked this week about all these positions, he didn't say anything better. He offered prayer in response to the Maine shooting that happened this week. When Sean Hannity asked him this week about like your positions on the issues, Mike Johnson basically said, I'm quoting, go pick up a Bible off your shelf and read it. That's my worldview. Which doesn't explain much of anything because, as everybody knows, when you have a book that's that large and that vague, all interpretations are allowed. His positions are really whatever he wants them to be, and you can always justify whatever you want using cherry picked Bible verses. So, the point is, this guy is now the Speaker of the House. He gets to decide the agenda for the House, he gets to decide what bills they're going to vote on. And he has been working to implement the Christian nationalist agenda his entire career. He did it as an attorney for Christian legal groups. He did it as a state lawmaker in Louisiana. He's done it for years as a member of Congress. And now he can shift the party even more to the right. I guess if there's a silver lining, it's that he's so extreme. He's so right wing that I hope every campaign ad, no matter where you are in the country, for a House candidate, Senate candidate, what have you, is, hey, this Republican who's running to get reelected voted for Mike Johnson to be the Speaker of the House. And look at how crazy Mike Johnson is. Just like I hope all these ads say, hey, you vote for the Republican, then you're not going to have abortion rights in whatever state you're in. It's scary. It worked when it came to abortion rights. I hope Mike Johnson is also used as like a weapon in these ads because it's not okay. So the question that remains is, how the hell did this guy with these extreme views lasting so many decades, how come he was able to just get easily, unanimously elected as Speaker of the House? And to that point, let me show you one last thing here. This is from the New Yorker. A reporter asked a former GOP aide how moderate members, he says that loosely, I believe, moderate members of the GOP, could justify voting against Jim Jordan, but for Mike Johnson. Their politics are nearly indistinguishable. Johnson, who sits on Jordan's judiciary, once compared their relationship to being like Batman and Robin. And check this out. The aide replied, "Have you heard of Mike Johnson?" That's it. That's it. That's what he has going for him. He's so generically named, and he's been so anonymous over the years for people who don't pay attention like to the nitty-gritty details of these stories, that no one, like if I say Marjorie Taylor Greene, you have thoughts about her. If I say Lauren Boebert or Jim Jordan, you have thoughts about them. If I say Mike Johnson, even though he shares all those views, most Americans who even care about politics are going to be like, yeah, I don't know anything about this dude. So he probably can't be that bad. And the truth is, no, he's bad. He's way worse than you think. But because he's not obsessed with getting in front of the cameras or saying, the worst possible versions of these things, even if he did in the past, he was able to become Speaker of the House, second in line to the presidency. That is frightening. And I think that is one reason I think it's important to highlight when school board members say crazy things, even though it's very local news. It's important to highlight when Greg Locke or some other crazy pastor says something ridiculous, or even like fringy religious extremists. I know they seem like small potatoes, but often those are the people taking stepping stones to run for local office or statewide office or more. And it is important to document and highlight the crazy shit they say so that when you Google them or something, those crazy things come up. Just this week, if you live in Tennessee, in Franklin, Tennessee, there was a mayoral election, and one of the candidates was Gabrielle Hansen, who was basically a white supremacist embracing mega cultist who made the news because she was just lying and surrounding herself with the worst sorts of people. And because people kept tabs on all that stuff, Phil Williams, a local reporter especially, because they were relentless in documenting her extremism, she lost by a landslide this week. No one seriously reported on Mike Johnson for the years he's been doing this stuff, even as a congressman. And I think that's why he was able to skate to the top of the Republican Party at this point. Arguably the most powerful Republican in the country right now, except for maybe Donald Trump.